Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday, the weekly YouTube series where we talk about video game console repairs, mods, and restorations. And this week we have the Panasonic 3DO. This was a console that came out in the mid-90s, and it's, regarded kind of as a failure. People tend to lump it in the same category as the Philips CDI, but, I would argue that there's actually some pretty decent games on this console. So what we're going to be doing with this one is, it works, it's totally fine, but we're going to try to make it better than it ever was. So we're going to be adding an RGB kit to it so that we can get the highest quality video from it. And aside from that, we're also going to give it a good cleanup because, you can see here, it's been in storage for a very long time. It's pretty filthy on the outside. So yeah, we're going to, do a little bit of restoration on this thing. We're going to, add in the RGB kit and make it better than it's ever been. All right, let's get started. All right, so we're going to start by just disassembling this system, and I already took the liberty of removing the 4 Phillips screws that are at the bottom of this console, and doing that means that now I can take the top lid off. There we go. And I'm going to Windex that and clean the hell out of it because it is filthy. So yeah, at least internally this system looks pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and start taking it apart. And it's really not that hard. You just need to remove all the components with a Phillips screwdriver. So not that bad. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to remove this RF modulator because the way that this mod works is that you install it on the RGB encoder, which is a chip that's kind of out of screen or barely in screen right here, and then you're going to put in, or I'm going to put in, this new mini DIN connector, and it's going to go in the same place over here. And then there's also a switch to alternate between 240p and 480i. And I believe that is going to end up going here. So what's really nice about this mod is that you don't need to make any kind of adjustments to the case. You can use the existing ports, and just by removing RF you can have all that functionality. So yeah, first order of business, we're going to take this out. Okay. So, as you might guess, we're going to do this in a similar manner that you've seen me handle things on other episodes in this channel. And so what I'm going to do is start by just adding some fresh solder to all the points that anchor the RF modulator in place. And mixing old solder like this with new helps to loosen things up. And then I'm going to go ahead with my desoldering gun and I'm going to remove all of that solder. Okay, that should be most of it. The rest of it I can kind of do mechanically. Should be able to anyhow. Okay, so I'm going to basically wedge this in here and use it as a fulcrum point. Just like that, just a screwdriver, and then when I add heat and I twist, I should be able to loosen things up a little bit more. that one's out. And there we go. Okay, so we're back on the underside of the PCB where I just removed the RF modulator, and now we're going to be installing these little pins here. I think these are just little guideposts for the kit. And what you're supposed to do is just position them like so, like right at the edge, facing toward the edge of the PCB. And then I have this kind of on the edge of my table so I can kind of look underneath and see that everything is straight, which so far it seems to be. And then once you've got all that done, then you want to just kind of tack these guys in place. So I'm just going to add a little bit of solder to my iron. You can hold these down with your fingers, but it is a little tricky, and I think that's actually what I'm going to need to do because it's not straight any longer. But okay. So now we're going to do the same thing. On that guy. And yeah, it's not straight any longer, but that's fine. Just going to melt it again. Okay, and I think that's pretty good. So yeah, I believe these are just some kind of anchor. I'm not sure yet, but we'll find out. I'm just adding a little more solder to secure these down. And now if we flip over the board, you can see how things look. Yeah, they're definitely not perfect. I'm going to see if I can straighten them up a little more. I might have to do that off camera, but yeah, I'll take care of that and then we'll be back in a second. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is get this 240p switch hooked up, and that's basically what the adapter board looks like, and it's really straightforward. You just got to solder it in. Easiest way to do this is to anchor down one and get everything all nice and straight, and then once it's locked in, you can just solder the remaining points. And there we go. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to take these two boards and we're going to put them together like so. And all we really need to do is just kind of line them up and then just get like a little bit of solder on the tip of your iron. And then your objective here is really just to kind of tack things down. You don't need to put in a lot of solder here, just enough to kind of hold these guys together. Alright, so here's the last little piece that we've got to add. And it just fits like so. Oof, that's hot. Try not to burn yourself. Do your best to line everything up if you can. ow. Okay, now I think I'm all set with a little bit of burning on top of that. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and install that big stack of PCBs that we made for the 240p switch. And it's basically going to go right here. And so yeah, what I did was I just added a fair amount of flux, and I'm going to come at this from the side here and just start tacking it in. Okay, it should be locked in at this point. I'm gonna okay, all set. Alright, so for this next step, what I've done is I've just reinstalled the motherboard back into the shell, and I'm doing that because I want to make sure that this DIN connector is going to be centered properly where the RF port used to be. So to do that, I'm just kind of lining things up, and then I'm just going to use my finger to center it, just looking at it from the back and making sure that everything is reasonably centered, which it is. And now what I'm going to do is go ahead and just start trying to tack it in with some solder. And the way I'm going to do this is just adding it to my iron, and then coming in, just trying to get it all around, and just putting it here at this interface between the two, and just seeing if I can get it tacked in. And then once my hands are free, I can kind of do a better job of this. Right now I'm just trying to hold it in place. And it's not quite there. Okay, so I lost a little bit of footage, and I'm going to just kind of continue where I had left off. So basically, if you guys had seen in the last clip, I was just trying to get everything aligned. Once it's all aligned, you just have to kind of scrape the edge of the DIN connector and continue to add fresh solder to everything, which is what I'm doing right now. And that helps to ensure that you've got a nice, strong connection here. You want this to be really strong mechanically, because every time you insert or remove the cable, you're going to put mechanical stress on this joint, and you don't want these things to separate out. Okay. So at this point I feel like it's pretty solid. I've used a ridiculous pile of solder at this point. And I think that that DIN connector is not going to be going anywhere. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to install before we move on to the actual RGB mod is this little PCB here. So this gives me easy access to connect all the different things, you know, the RGB, the sync, the sound, the ground, the 5 volts, to the mini DIN. Makes things very, very simple. And connecting it up to the connector is also very simple. Just gotta solder in these anchor points. too much over here. Went a little too crazy with the solder. No big deal. Okay, so we are basically ready to go to the next step. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to do is just remove a single resistor before we go ahead and start the flat flex cable installation. So we have the VP536 encoder with this specific unit. If you've got a different type of 3DO, then your instructions are also going to be different. But in this case, all we have to do is just remove this one resistor, and it's very simple. Just kind of put heat on both sides, and that's it. It's out. Okay, so now we're at the most difficult part of this mod, which is to install this flat flex cable. And normally I would do this kind of work under a microscope, but unfortunately the board is so huge it doesn't fit under my scope. And so what I've resorted to is an older way I've dealt with this kind of problem, which is to use a magnifying glass. And it's not as good, but it will be good enough. And so basically now what we're going to try to do is we're going to just tack it in the center, try to hold it in place, and then kind of go pin by pin and get everything going. So I don't want a lot of solder here. I just want like a little bit of solder on my tip. And it's just so that I can tack things down. Okay, so now I'm going to just go over my work and make sure that there aren't any shorts and make sure that all of these pins are properly connected to the chip. That's going to take some time, and I'm going to just do that off camera because it's rather boring and tedious. But if you're doing this yourself, you should definitely do that kind of work, because if there are shorts, you could damage both the RGB mod and you could also damage the 3DO itself, so you got to be really careful. Alright, so we're back and I've finished all the wiring, and I just wanted to kind of show you what the end result is. So, you know, the rest of it really isn't that difficult. The main things you have to do is solder a wire from this HZ0 pad to one of the sides of that resistor that we had removed earlier on. And then everything else from there is just simply connecting the mod board over to the DIN connector, and everything is clearly labeled, so you just follow RGB sync ground over to here. You can pull 5 volts from where the RF modulator used to be, and then you get audio left and right just by tapping in to the jacks that are here on this side of the board. So yeah, everything at this point is complete. So the next thing that we're going to do is start assembling the system and seeing how it looks. Okay guys, so we are back, and I've more or less got everything put together, just enough for a quick test. And yeah, as you can see, it looks pretty damn awesome. I'm actually really impressed by how much the 3DO RGB kit improves the quality of the video here. So I just have it sent basically from my Genesis Model 2 RGB cable, and it's going to my OSSC, and then the OSSC is tripling it to 720p. And yeah, it looks absolutely stunning. So yeah, I hope you guys found this little guide useful. If you guys like this kind of content, please feel free to like and subscribe. I'll have more videos out every Friday. And yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.